Today's disagreement is about AI tutoring and the future of personalized learning. There are a lot of bold claims being bandied about when it comes to AI tutoring. Many of you might have read Mark Andreessen's techno-optimist newsletter where he described a vision where every child would have a 24/7 tutor that was the embodiment of infinite love. So we are going to interrogate that claim today. And to do that, we've brought together, I think, two of the smartest people when it comes to AI tutoring and personalized learning. Here we have Ben Riley. Give it up for Ben. Ben is the founder of Deans for Impact, and more recently, the founder of Cognitive Resonance, which is a think tank-like organization that is dedicated to improving our understanding of human cognition and generative AI. And over here we have Niels Hoven. Give it up for Niels. So Niels is the founder of Mentava, a software company and tutoring company dedicated to accelerating learning. Niels raised a pre-seed round from a number of A-list celebrities, including last night's keynote speaker. I believe it was, say his name again? Amjad. Tim Ferriss, Gary Tan, Mike Maples, who's speaking tomorrow. So we're going to hear much more about Mentava and what you're up to in the tutoring space. So with that, take a deep breath, open your mind as far as it's willing to go, and prepare for a different kind of conversation on AI and the future of learning. How's that? That was all right? All right. Yeah. We're going to produce the actual podcast so we can, break the fourth wall whenever we need to. Okay. Here we go. You guys ready? All right. So I think we're going to start talking about personalized learning. I think we'll start with some of your vision and values, which I think we'll see, but I think they might diverge quite a bit. And so we'll start at a high level, then we will really get into AI tutoring capabilities and sort of what that looks like, and then we will end with the implications of where we're at and where that's going. So first, some context. So when it comes to personalized learning, how many of you were in the world of K-12 education? I mean, I imagine most of you between 2012 and 2017. Just raise your hand. So if you were there, you will recall phrases like personalized learning, personalized pathways, student ownership, choice and voice, competency-based, variable-paced, you name it, right? There was an orgy of enthusiasm for personalized learning during that period, right? And I participated in it, as did, I saw you guys there, many of you. So, conferences, think tanks, billions of dollars invested in personalized learning. So I want to start by asking Ben, 10 to 12 years later, after, billions of dollars, all of that energy, enthusiasm, how has it worked out to date?
Bad. Bad. It worked out poorly. And the thing that's remarkable is that it was predictable that it would work out poorly. And what's been fascinating, and if I'm being honest, at times frustrating, is to see some of the very same advocates who were pushing for it then are back pushing it now. So just when it felt like, sort of the wave of these ideas which are fundamentally at odds with some basic facts of how we think and learn, had kind of petered out, right? And I'll name names, okay? The Chan Zuckerberg initiative made a huge splash around what was then called Summit Learning Platform, and then later changed that to Gradients, and then all of a sudden that didn't work out well, and we don't hear so much about that anymore, and they're sort of quietly, it's not dead, but it's certainly not like the focal point anymore. 10 years ago, if we were doing this, sitting across from me would be somebody named Max Ventia. I don't know how many of you remember Max. Max raised $175 million maybe 200, somewhere between that. So well done, Max. Raised it from people like Mark Zuckerberg and Peter Thiel and said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to personalize education all the way down. I'm going to create a $30,000 a year private school for kids that will be completely personalized. Super exciting, invited to many panels like this. New Yorker does a huge profile, quotes one Jennifer Carolyn of Reach Capital, saying, I will say, if you go back and read that quote, maybe we should slow down a little bit. Well done, Jennifer. You don't see Max at these conferences anymore. He's not involved in the education system anymore. And the reason for that is that $175 million went up in smoke. It had no meaningful return whatsoever to students. I have often wondered, and some enterprising journalists should track down the kids who actually went to that unfortunate school for a few years and see how that worked out for them. I'm genuinely curious. So here we are now 10 years later, and what's happened? The very same people, again, I'll name names, Bill Gates, Sal Khan, and others, are saying, no, this time we've got it. This time we've got it. We thought we could do it before with machine learning algorithms. That's how we were going to be able to differentiate and provide kids what they need. But now it's AI. And I will say here now, and I'm sure we'll explore this over the next hour, it's going to fail as spectacularly this time around as it did then.
Okay, well, we're out of the gate. Niels, is this time different? Is AI like a new paradigm that will allow us to pursue personalized learning?
So I think I would agree with Ben that that the last time did fail, but I think Ben is pointing the finger at the software. He's saying the software isn't good enough and the software is not going to be good enough. And I would point the finger someplace else. I think the problem with a lot of the personalized learning paradigms is because we were never building for the right thing. And I think the goals of education policy, I'm going to jump right into the spicy stuff. The goals of education policy, modern education policy, is not to allow every child to reach their potential. The goal of modern education policy is to close gaps between high-achieving students and struggling students. And, of course, that is an incredible goal, and that's something we should all be striving for, but the way we actually see this implemented in practice is high-achieving students are prevented from learning. Like you look at San Francisco, you're literally not allowed to teach material above grade level because the goal here is equal outcomes. And I think the vision for personalized learning that people tried to build to fix was, with personalized learning, we are going to equalize outcomes and have every child magically progress at the same pace. And I don't think that is the magic of personalized learning. I don't think that was ever going to be a successful outcome. I think the magic of personalized learning, should we ever achieve that, is allowing every child to progress at their own pace, which could be different. And so if you have some kids who need to be moving at half the speed, and you have some kids who are capable of moving at twice the speed, I think that's where you'll still see impacts of personalized learning. And I don't know if the software was there 10 years ago, like maybe it would have been possible, but I think there's a possibility that with AI, we might be able to get there this time around.
So just to be clear, while the software does indeed suck, it's not a software argument that I'm making. Okay. I'm making the case that it was predictable then, as it is predictable now, that the way we actually think and learn is actually not what you just described. And it's not what Max Mentava and Bill Gates and what Sal Khan and others have been describing. And it's a little bit fascinating to me how the vice grip of this idea that every student must pursue their own path at their own pace, and sometimes of the content of their own choosing. It's first of all, just so you all know, this is a uniquely American phenomena. Like the rest of the world is not pursuing this. This is like taking every aspect that they think about America and saying, yes, let's hypercharge that and then like inject that into our education system, right? So that's number one. My point is that actually, if you have even just a basic understanding of human cognition and a basic understanding of the history of how we have become to be the species that sits here together, collectively, in person, having conversations collectively in solidarity, that's our superpower. And that over and over and over again, the people largely located in the physical space we are located in right now in Silicon Valley are almost willfully and obliviously clueless to this. That they have continually said that actually what we want to do is disaggregate this, break this apart, at the very same time that American democracy has been imperiled by the fact that we are disaggregating our media channels. I mean, this is the part that's blowing me away. It's like, just look around at what's happening with adults and how they are personalizing their choice of news content. And as it turns out, there is a huge swath of Americans right now who think the election was stolen. Okay? There is a huge swath of Americans right now who think that there are people in Springfield, Ohio, coming from Haiti, who are eating dogs and cats. Okay? That's a reality, and that's what adults are doing.
And you're saying, I just want to be very clear that the personalization of algorithms on social media and the way information is disseminated, you're making an analogy to Niels's desire to have students pursue personalized pathways, that the personalization of information is inherently divisive and anti-human.
That's one of my arguments, but yes.
Okay, so
here we go, Niels.
I also dislike filter bubbles and all of the division that it creates. I would say when I think about personalized learning, what I really think about is matching the content to the student's sort of level of understanding and pace that they are able to learn it. So I guess I would ask a clarifying question, was that do you agree or disagree that different people learn things at different speeds?
So of course, different people learn different things at different speeds. The mistake in personalized learning, and perhaps the mistake that is underlying the premise of your question, is the notion that we can easily identify that in a particular time and then tailor an instructional path to meet that. That's where the magical thinking comes in.
But isn't that just the goal of mastery learning, which is, I would say, fairly well accepted?
I don't know if mastery learning is well accepted. A lot of people complain about so-called seat time, but it is perhaps telling that around the entire globe, as it turns out, learning is choppy. You very rarely, and this is one of the things the tech companies never get right about this, you never master something like in a go, and then it's like you take a quiz and it shows that you've mastered it, and then it move on to the next thing. That so many edtech companies over the last decade have been built on that flawed premise, right? It takes repetition. It takes what cognitive scientists called interleaving, the bringing of different ideas together, spaced practice that takes place over time. And guess what? Even when you learned it at time X, if you advance to time Y, you might have forgotten it by then.
But why is it so unreasonable to have software deliver that? Like, why does that seem so impossible?
Well, it's unreasonable because software, and this is an incredibly difficult challenge for humans, but software has no idea, including AI today, to bring it into the AI in the present, has no idea, no capability to imagine what is going on in the mind of the students who are using it. Has no capability of that. And even the most ardent sort of supporters of that today would not claim that it can do that. Cognitive scientists call that theory of mind. Every single human, all of you sitting in this, everybody listening at home, has the ability to imagine the mental state of another. That is a fundamental thing about human beings. We can imagine the mental states of another. The speaker who came this morning, for those who were present and for those who are listening home, this was a fantastic speaker who didn't mention cognitive science once, but everything he said was fully aligned to cognitive science around storytelling. This was somebody saying, looking at time immemorial, you had Aristotle and his poetics. You have Shakespeare and the 5-act play. You have Hollywood and the structure of that. That is a story that is being told. Well, he literally put a graphic up that was brilliant. You are trying to instill in the mind of another an idea. That is what humans can do. That is fundamental to what we can do.
So
You go first.
I'm going to disagree.
You go first. But
okay, so yeah. I don't see why you would jump to the assumption that you need theory of mind to understand if a child understands or doesn't understand something. For example, so we build software to teach preschoolers to read, as young as age 2 or 3. So we just had a 3-year-old finish our curriculum. It took about 4 months to get them to a mid-first grade reading level. And we do not need theory of mind in our software to figure out, does this child know like the letter F? We can just show them the letter F and say, what sound does this make? And if they get it right, then we know that they know it at that moment in time. We can certainly use spaced repetition to come back to it later, but the software doesn't need to emulate their mental state in order to match them with the level of difficulty that they need.
I can't speak to the specifics of your product because I haven't seen it, I haven't demoed it. What I can tell you is a version of what you have said has been said by just about every edtech entrepreneur who's crossed my path over the last 15 years, and I'm sorry to break the bad news, you're not going to succeed with doing what you're trying to do. And I say that because even if what you are doing right now is moderately successful in identifying that they don't know the letter F, at the end of the day, human cognition is one of the most complex things that exists in the world. I might argue it is the most complex thing that exists in the world. And using a algorithmic process, or in the case of large language models, an auto-regressive process, to try to guess at what it is that a student may need, it's so limited. It's so incredibly limited.
Okay, so let's get into the AI. Let's get technical for a little bit, because that was a bold statement and prediction. What, like, is there, in my mind, it's very reasonable to say that there was a paradigm up until the past year, a pre-AI paradigm, where most of what Ben was saying, or much of what you were saying, is true. And I think there is a credible argument now to say that over the next few years, the power of just LLMs and whatever else comes is going to, whether it reaches theory of mind or not, is going to develop the nuanced capabilities to emulate much of what a human tutor does. Do you believe that? And okay, and walk us through. I mean, you're in the middle. You do not currently have much AI in your tutoring product,
right?
Software.
We currently don't use AI. I think the magic of AI for teaching, like the potential magic of AI for teaching, is its adaptability. And I think, as Ben was saying, okay, let's say as long as a student is understanding everything, then teaching them is fairly easy. You just keep feeding them more and more content, and they learn it, and they keep going. But at some point, they're going to misunderstand something. They fall off the learning path, and you need to essentially correct them and get them back onto that learning path. And like, how do you do that? You have to diagnose, where's the misunderstanding? Where are they not getting here? What do I need to give them to get them back on track? And I think you can do without AI. You could do that in software with a bunch of if-then statements. Do you understand this? No. Do you understand this? No. Do you understand this? Or sorry, do you understand this? Yes. Do you understand this? Yes. Do you understand this? No. Oh, okay, that's the thing you don't understand. Let's give you the appropriate instruction to get you back on track. The magic of AI is in its adaptability. So the hope is that in the future, you no longer have to figure out every single possible place at which a child could fall off that main learning pathway and get confused. You can use AI as a safety net to help diagnose what is the misunderstanding there. Let's get them back onto this main pathway, this main learning pathway.
So, okay, so let's stick with AI tutoring, and then you'll be able to address that. I do want to just throw out a little red meat for Ben. It doesn't seem like you need any much more of it, to be honest. Yeah, you're well fed. So that was not. You have a lovely physique. That was not a comment about your physique. If anyone reads Dan Meyer's Substack, if you don't, you should. He is right there with Ben, fighting the good AI skeptical fight. He had a list of, I think it was like 7 quotes from Bill Gates over the past 15 years. And literally everyone said more or less the same thing, leading up to what he said to Oprah, I think a week ago or less than a week ago. So I'm going to read that. And then I think we can work off of the Bill Gates vision and start to dial in like where we're at now and where we are going with this. And so here we go. Bill said to Oprah on the couch, "The dream that you could have a tutor who is always available to you and understands how to motivate you, what your level of knowledge is. When you're outside the classroom, that personal tutor is helping you out, encouraging you. And then your teacher, talks to that personal tutor, says, 'Hey, personal tutor, what advice do you need to help you teach, Johnny today?'" Okay, so that's, I'll give you your red meat. Take that for a second, and then let's work off of that to see where we are and where we're going over the next 3 years, and try to dial it in.
Well, so you say it's red meat, but it's fun and games here, but it's serious, right? I mean, Bill Gates is an incredibly wealthy person with an incredible amount of power and a foundation that he has used to try to change American and, frankly, worldwide education to conform to his vision. So we shouldn't, we can laugh about it. It can be red meats, and I'll get to a Bill Gates quote in a second, not the one you read. But we actually have to take it seriously that somebody with that much power has continually made incredibly mistaken and wrong predictions about what was going to happen and what should happen in education. And I really have reached the point, and luckily I no longer am getting any funding from them, where I've had enough of it. I've literally had enough of it. We should stop listening to Bill Gates. He does not know what he's talking about. He doesn't.
Look at that.
Now on AI in particular, he laid out that broad vision there. Last year, at the ASU GSV conference, for listeners who may not be familiar, this is probably the high watermark of edtech. Venture capital meets thought leaders. It's all the cliches. It's Silicon Valley, the TV show, but in Arizona. It was that meeting, actually it was in San Diego. So Bill Gates last year, in April of last year, said that within 18 months, from April of last year, that we would have AI tutors that would be better than humans at teaching kids how to read. So we got about a week to go for that prediction to come true. People accuse me and other AI skeptics of moving the goalposts, saying, well, you never said it was going to be able to do what it can able to do now. And they've got a point. Like, I think that the capabilities that large language models have shown in being responsive to a wide range of inquiries is beyond what a lot of folks, myself included, would have said even as recently as 3, 4, 5 years ago before it was deployed. We can acknowledge that. But that does not then turn around and I think excuse people like Bill Gates or Sal Khan or any of the other folks who are back at it again selling AI snake oil in education, who are saying that this is going to be able to do all of the things that he just described, or Mark Anderson, that's going to have infinite love. I mean, what is he talking about?
I don't know. Maybe Mark needs some love. Maybe he's deprived of love and needs as much as he can get. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so. But Niels, you have a vision that is not necessarily Bill Gates, but it's a vision of ungated learner. This idea that a motivated learner can pursue it. And so, take us from where you're at now to your vision. It's not infinite love, but of ungated learning.
I mean, this is a tough one because I agree with so much what Ben just said.
Good. No, that's great.
I think our difference is that I think I have a lot more optimism about essentially like the trajectory of AI and the trajectory of technology. And I think part of the reason is like we look at this room and no one knows exactly where AI is going, but there's a lot of very smart people here and all around the world trying to figure it out. Like trying to figure out what can we use AI for. And so I think it's irresponsible. Like when we are still sitting in this room trying to figure out what can AI become, I think it is irresponsible to go tell teachers, oh, like AI is ready now, you should be using it. Like, no, the smartest people in the world don't know what AI is good for yet. And we're trying to figure it out. And now I lost your question.
So, okay. So take that optimism.
Okay.
Operationalize it a little bit in Mentava. Zoom out 2 years or 3 years, and what does ungated learning look like? That's a phrase you've used with me a couple times.
Right.
It's obviously an enticing phrase, but like, how do we get there, and what does it look like?
Okay. Yeah. Let me think about how to approach this. So I think one of the failures of our current education system and education policy is its refusal to allow for students to essentially progress at their own pace. And I'm not talking about essentially different personalized curriculum. I'm just saying, okay, if you have a kid who can do a year of math in 2 years, let them do that year of math. If they can do 2 years of math in 1 year, or either way, if they need 2 years to do 1 year of math and they really need that, allow them to do that. If they can do 2 years of math in 1 year, allow them to do that also. I think we used to allow some aspect of that through ability grouping. That is, I'm a big fan of ability grouping. I know that many people are not, but I think it's entirely appropriate to say, okay, kids should be allowed to learn the material that they are ready for at their own pace and essentially turn them loose. Now, I guess even if you are on board with that and you want to say, okay, how can we make sure that kids get the right material at the right time? That's very hard for teachers, right? We just don't have that many teachers to give that level of attention to each individual kid. But if you have now an AI teacher that can give that sort of flexibility and that adaptability to each kid, then all of a sudden, and you don't have to allow everybody to move at the same pace. All right. I'm glad you can
Yeah,
edit
no,
this later.
look,
Okay.
we have all the time in the world.
Okay.
We're at the multiversity, and there's some other universe where this is going on, and you nailed it the first try. But now, you got time.
Okay, so let's say that what is the magic of personalized learning? Why can it allow kids to move so much faster? Let's say that you have a classroom of kids. You've got 26 kids in the class, and you're trying to teach them the letters of the alphabet, and every kid is confused about a different letter. And it takes a day to essentially unblock that kid and get them back on the right track. If you have to teach the same material to the entire class at the same time, then on day 1, you're going to fix A for one kid. On day 2, you're going to fix B for another kid. And then after 26 days, you finally managed to unblock the entire class, and you can move forward. Now, if you had 26 teachers in the class at one time, you could give each kid the help they need on your first day, and now all of a sudden on day 2, you're off to the races and everybody can keep learning. So now you're moving 26 times faster. Now, we don't have 26 teachers, but I believe that AI can give us that level of personalization and that level of essentially diagnosis and fixing to get people back on the same track and learning faster.
Okay, I know you have a lot of thoughts on that. I do. You know what? Share your thoughts, and then
Is that not why I'm here, or?
Well, I guess it is. I mean,
Okay.
you're not bashful. Okay, share your thoughts, and then I want to address a very specific use case within what Niels was talking about. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, again, I don't want to belabor the point, but it again shows the sort of maniacal focus we have on trying to maximize individual capability, which, again, we can debate, and I would say that the technology isn't there to support it. But even as a vision of what we should want for our education system, I think it's questionable. One of the persons, if not the most influential in my thinking, certainly, top 5, a friend, a mentor, is the cognitive scientist Dan Willingham. I cannot recommend his writing, his book, Why Don't Kids Like School, enough. And he has a phrase in that book that I like to repeat because I think it's almost counterintuitive, which is that all humans, including students, are more alike than different in how we think and learn. Let me say that again. All humans, including students, are more alike than different in how we think and learn. And the vision supporting personalized learning fundamentally is about saying, well, let's try to magnify and treat the differences, including, understandably, sort of when there's those who might be of higher capability, let's magnify that and try to amplify that, instead of thinking about the commonalities and the ways to build solidarity in classrooms. And I don't think it's a coincidence. In fact, I know it's not a coincidence, historically, that public education as an enterprise, the notion that we should actually take all the kids within a body politic, a nation state, and send them to the same school, moved hand in hand with democracy. Like, that concept did not exist before democracy. And I think that, in all seriousness, with all due respect to the folks at the Multiversity and being here in the heart of Silicon Valley, this community has an outsized responsibility to learn that history and to appreciate it in more deep fashion, because this individualization, personalization dream, which is manifesting both educationally and in media and in our politics, might tear this country apart.
Okay. Well, you got a woohoo. Well,
Thank you.
We got nice woohoo. We're going to come back to the ethics of personalization in a second. I want to stay with AI because there's an important point. And Ben, I want to push your skepticism here. How many of you have heard of Lawrence Holt's paper on the 5%? Raise your hand on the 5%. Okay. So essentially what it's saying is that there's many people, it's not just Sal Khan, but Sal Khan gave some efficacy data around his product, and it turned out that he threw out 95% of the users because they didn't use it like the way it was recommended. So there were 5% of the students who used it the way it was recommended, the highly motivated, the higher achieving students, and it worked great for them. And then but that was 5%. The other 95% didn't want to sit in front of a screen for 30 minutes a day. So let's talk about high performing, highly motivated students for a second. It's obviously you are an activist and an advocate for those students. When it comes to AI, I think there's certainly, my read right now, there's an argument that the 95%, it is going to be hard to have the AI both have the pedagogical capabilities and the motivational capabilities. But if you're a highly motivated student and the motivation is there and exists, then how far away are we from that sort of learning? And I have some personal anecdotes on it, but can you speak to that?
Yeah, I would say the ability for a highly achieving, highly motivated kid to learn whatever they want as fast as they want has always been there. Right? You can get a book from the library. You can go get a math book. There's who's the Indian mathematician who taught himself all of math history, basically from a book in the middle of nowhere. And so that capability has always been there, but it becomes increasingly accessible the better technology gets. Instead of doing it out of a book, maybe you can watch videos. You have YouTube, you have Khan Academy. Now we have AI is not great, but maybe it can answer some questions. So if I'm studying out of a math book and I get confused, then now I have a math tutor who I can say, if I'm motivated enough, AI math tutor, there's this concept in this book. Can you explain to me how this derivative works? And I can get an explanation that I wouldn't have had before. And so the way I see AI right now is it is making this sort of self-paced learning accessible and possible for a wider segment of the population than it ever has been before.
Yeah, I have a friend who's junior in high school. He ran almost a pilot with him, and he did AP Calculus in 2 months using ChatGPT with very few hallucinations. And so again, he's the 5%. There is this avenue. Now, getting back to the ethics of that, and I think a question before the ethics though is if they can do it anyway, why not just let this happen outside of the school context? Why not have, the communal, social, humane learning that Ben is advocating for during the school day, and then just have Kumon on crack with AI, whenever you want? Why does it have to be integrated in the school? Because just on a practical level, if you're 3 grade levels ahead over the course of 4 months, that creates a whole set of structural, logistical, technocratic challenges that, in addition to whatever additional spiritual and pedagogical objections Ben will have. So why not just think about this outside of the context of school?
I think you can say it does come back to an equity issue. It comes back to a belonging issue. I think whether you're talking about a kid who is 3 years ahead or you're talking about a kid who is 3 years behind, having them to come into school every day and be presented with material that is inappropriate for them, whether they are not ready to learn it or whether they learned it 3 years ago and they're bored out of their mind, it is giving them this message that this place is not for you. Your learning needs don't matter. You don't belong here. And I think that's a cruel thing to do to a kid, whether they are far ahead or far behind.
So I have 3 layers of pushback to all this. The first layer is empirical. So we can hypothesize and trade anecdotes about what we think AI can do to help any learner. The reality is, I ask people, can you point me to a randomized control trial, the gold standard of empirical analysis, that will show that actually using AI has helped students? I am aware of one single randomized control trial that has measured student learning outcomes at the K-12 level. What did it find? It found that students learned a lot less when they learned or used ChatGPT. Now, why is that? This brings me to layer number 2, the theoretical. It is obvious. It is a tool of cognitive automation. It is something you can use to displace your own effortful thinking. And so students, because they're humans, will sometimes make use of this tool to have it do the thinking, I'm using air quotes, listeners, rather than having to do it themselves, okay? This is obviously happening. Sometimes I feel like we're pretending and people kind of want to hand wave away and they call it the cheating problem. It's not a cheating problem. It's like saying that we've taken this tool and every time you go to the gym, you don't have to lift the weights anymore. It kind of defeats the point of the gym. That's really what's going on. And there is emerging evidence, and I think this is entirely predictable, that the rate of usage amongst students is higher amongst students who are less cognitively capable, are more likely to be black or brown. This is in the United States, okay? So like, I'm not surprised by any of that, okay? Because for those students, okay, because they have been facing any number of inequities throughout their life and historical injustices that have mounted and fallen on their shoulders, if they have a way that they can sort of shortcut some of the difficulties that are presented by school, I don't begrudge them from taking it. But we have no idea, as we sit here right now, what the long-term consequences of that be. There is no way to do an empirical study right now because we don't know. And I think in particular about the kids who went through the pandemic and were deprived of a traditional education with their students and are now going through this LLM-based Conmigo augmented reality. We have no idea what will happen with those students, but I have a prediction. And that brings me to the moral claim, my third and final layer of it, which is that even if it were true that using this tool was beneficial to our most cognitively capable kids, even if it were true that by giving them this individualized pathway, it could set them off into some sort of unbelievable achievement, we ought to think really carefully about what that says about our social priorities, that we have created such a tool and are unleashing it. You know, like there is a long line of both philosophical and historical history that's worth reading here. Nietzsche talked about this. He called it the Übermensch. I mean, it literally was sort of like, how can we create these people who will upend our society? That should be the goal, right? And in some of your rhetoric today and in some of what I've read on your website, I think you're playing into that. You're leaning in. You're saying, yes, like that is what I want to create. I want to have these children who can learn X amount of time. And I think that like most parents, and I was talking to one tonight over dinner, who has an incredibly bright child, gets all the way to one of our elite privileged institutions, and suddenly finds that her child is no longer able to continue, and almost like checks out. It's my description, not hers, but almost like checks out of the process. Now, she did everything from dinner conversation I could learn to put that child on the path to academic success, but sometimes it can be too much. Earlier today at one of the other sessions, we learned that founders are three times more likely to be suicidal, something like 30 or 40% more likely to have mental health issues. Now, why is that? Well, it turns out that intelligence is not like some panacea of happiness, you know? And that doesn't mean, I want to be very crystal clear about this, that does not mean we should not orient our education system around lifting up intelligence across the board. It does mean that we should perhaps not prioritize or think that what we need is a tool that will help the most benefited already get even more benefits educationally. That's what we should be oriented around.
Okay, Niels, this is your wheelhouse.
All right. All right. I think there's a lot of stuff there. I'll drill in on a couple things. I think I would say a lot of the criticisms you just made of AI tools, ChatGPT, et cetera, can also be made of like the personal calculator. Right? Yes, it was a shortcut. Yes, you can use it to cheat, but now it is a tool that is in the world, that is an incredibly powerful tool, and we need to find a way to teach kids to use it the right way and not use it for cheating. And yeah, I think it would be irresponsible to introduce personal calculators into a school before we really understood how to use them and teach them, and it's probably too soon to be teaching kids how to use ChatGPT to cheat through their homework. But like, this is the new world we live in, and we have to deal with it. I think to your point about accelerating high-achieving kids, I think this is rhetoric that has been around for a very long time. The book The Hurried Child came out in the 80s. I was reading when I got into kindergarten. My kindergarten teacher told my mom that if she continued pushing me, I would commit suicide by the time I was in middle school. This is my kindergarten teacher telling the mother of a 6-year-old that I was going to commit suicide because she was pushing me too hard. But it turned out that I love learning, and I love being challenged, and I love the opportunity to explore my potential and see what I could learn. And there are so many stories of kids who are bored to death in school and are not given those opportunities to learn. And I guess I would ask, if you think that being challenged and given the opportunity to explore your potential and given the opportunity to, if you think that being challenged every day in school is so potentially disastrous to a student's mental health, You're shaking your head already. I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No,
if you feel
that's
that there's
basic.
okay,
I
if you
think
feel like
that's
there,
fair.
if the,
Yeah.
you feel like there is risk to a student's mental health from challenging them and encouraging them to achieve more, why are we calling out just the high achieving kids and say, okay, let's just not challenge them? If there really is a risk of suicide and mental illness and et cetera, then let's not challenge anybody. Let's give them all like this equal playing field where they don't have to be challenged and can be mentally safe if that's what we think they need.
The key distinction, and I'm glad you raised this because it's really important. Of course everybody wants students to be challenged. The distinction is that I want teachers and students to be challenged together, thinking together, working together, discoursing together. I do not want to disaggregate that and have somebody over here learning X and somebody over here learning Y and somebody over here Z at the different paces and at the different times. I've been to those schools. We tried this 10 years ago, and it was a debacle.
Let me ask you a question. How's that working out in most of our schools? I mean, what you're describing is the modality, the core modality that exists in most public schools, and we have a massive crisis with failing schools, especially in poor areas and marginalized communities. So, I think there certainly have been excellent critiques of personalized learning, but the status quo isn't working out so great.
So I always get frustrated with the pushback. Yeah, but let's make 2 points clear here.
Let's do
So
it.
we actually had a natural experiment
here.
in the
I'm
United
gonna get in the
States,
mix.
actually around the world. We shut down our public education system, okay? We shut down our schools. And the data is unambiguous across the board, including in the so-called failing schools that people sometimes, I think, stereotype in urban settings or wherever else. Everywhere, when you close down our schools, students learned a lot less. So if they're failing so bad, we would not have expected to see that. Right? We would have said, oh, actually, it doesn't matter much. Those schools aren't doing much. No, the data on that is unambiguous. So I reject the premise. I'm sorry, I do. And even if it gets claps here amongst the Silicon Valleyites, I reject the premise that the American education system is by and large failing its students.
Did you teach?
I did not teach.
Okay. I'm the only teacher out of the three of us. I taught at a school that I spent 2 years in, intimately familiar with the learning experience, and then now intimately familiar via my former colleagues with 20 years later where it's at. I mean, the outcomes in that school, which is not even, it's a median school within the Atlanta public schools, are horrific. So what do you reject about that?
So what I reject is, first of all, reasoning too much from the anecdotal, but number two, there's no question, no question. I've been to them too, Alex, as you well know. There are schools that are struggling. However, it is really hard to disentangle what we mean by a struggling school versus a struggling community, okay? Schools are reflections as much as they are sort of change agents within these communities, okay? But what people will do frequently is look at the test scores of students within a school and go, oh, that's a failing school. The test score of students in a school tells you nothing, literally nothing, about the quality of the school unless you are measuring the growth from start to finish. It is one of the single biggest mistakes. It plagued No Child Left Behind. It has plagued our American education system for at least the last decade, if not longer. Okay? It gets really hard. It gets really hard to try to measure that the impact that a school actually has. It's not impossible, but it's really hard. Okay? Now, that's point number one. Okay. So even if I grant your premise, even if I grant your premise, okay, and certainly there are many people who believe that we have plagued with failing schools across this great nation and we need to do something about it. Even if I grant that premise, that doesn't mean AI is the answer. Just because there is something that is a problem doesn't mean any solution that you propose must be better and I have to accept it. We've got all sorts of theories that have been advanced and will continue to be advanced and frankly have been advanced. I mean, a lot of what is talked about with AI and frankly personalized learning goes back to progressive education from 100 years ago. Rousseau was talking about this. These are not new ideas. Everyone needs to read more history. It's all there. And so just
Rousseau.
My message is to read history,
Rousseau.
learn from history. Yes, it is.
No, I like Rousseau, but I think your point is AI the answer. That is the question today. I certainly think that whatever your assessment of the status quo, there's room for improvement. Especially, okay. So Niels, like, let's just crisp up. You talk about bundling and unbundling schools as a means of improvement, which is very, in fairness, a very Silicon Valley way to approach it. But maybe, and you can go with that, or you can go wherever you need to go. But like, if there's room for improvement, which we've agreed to, like, what should we be doing?
I guess this is going to come back to the question of what exactly are we trying to improve? And I think if your focus is on what are we going to do to help our struggling schools and our struggling communities, I mean, I have to agree. Like, I don't think that AI is a magic bullet there. My hope is that with AI, what we can do is, okay, let's go to bundling. All right.
Yeah, I
fix it in post-production. All right, bundling. Bundling, I see school as a bundle of childcare and academics, right? For some families, it is more focused on childcare. For some families, it's more delivering academics. As much as we say about schools failing, schools have something like an 80% approval rating from families. Families love their kids' school, and like, why wouldn't they? It is free childcare for their child, even if the academics aren't there. Like, your child is someplace where they are hopefully safe and loved for several hours a day while their parents are at work. I mean, that's a good deal. And maybe one of the best things we can hope for AI is if we can allow some students to get the attention that they need to essentially unbundle that and get their academics delivered through AI and have more opportunities open to them by more personalized learning, more personalized teaching, then that frees up the teacher's time to give it to the kids who aren't going to benefit from AI, but really need more time from a human teacher who needs more time to pay attention to them.
Okay, I'm now paying attention. Yeah, no, I'm just paying attention to time because I want to open it up to the audience and make sure we get a little Q&A. Yeah, so my guess is you're not going to be a fan of the unbundled package. You've offered some criticisms already, but like, fundamentally, do you think that the cognitive and the social can be disambiguated, disentangled?
I'm not sure what you're asking there, but I think I can respond.
The software, the experience that Niels talked about, the unbundling, is the software, especially for high achieving students, can provide the cognitive experience.
Right.
And then the broader other 6 hours of the day can provide the social experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I want to say in response to that is that my hunch and belief, frankly, at this point, based on what I think I know about students who have cognitively and academically succeeded, is that thinking for them, the effortful activity of thinking, is relatively pleasurable. Okay? Relatively being the operative word here. And the example I like to point to are like, who are the people who like to do crossword puzzles, right? If you think about a crossword puzzle, it's like a pointless activity. You're putting little letters in a box, and if you want, you can flip a page or you can look it up, and the answer is already there, right? And yet, for a large number of people, they every day wake up and do the crossword puzzle. And it's mentally taxing, it's effortful, right? There's absolutely no reason they do it other than like there's some weird sort of pleasure that they get through the act of doing it, the act of expressing the knowledge that they've gained, right? Now, my guess is, and I've seen this and I've had conversations with folks, particularly at elite institutions, like those students, once they start using AI, large language model AI, and they start to see it actually doing the work for them, they're like, I don't want this. Like, it's not something that they're gravitating to the tool. They're like, I don't want something that displaces my thinking. I like thinking, especially for students who have made it, who've succeeded academically. So I'm just not convinced that actually there's this, group of high achievers who are suddenly going to be blown away by it. I think that they almost have a natural inoculation against its usage. And I particularly think that, and this is frankly what I'm trying to do in my own efforts, is to help people understand the limitations of the tool so that you're less mystified as to how it's doing what it's doing, and you start to realize that it's not thinking at all. You know, it is, as some scholars have described it, a stochastic parrot, okay? A parrot says words but has no idea of the thoughts that underlie the words, right? That's what a large language model is.
Okay, so we're going to do our final segment here and then open it up for questions if we have time. Final segment, we end every show with this. It's called the Steel Man. Does anyone know what the concept of steel manning is? Do you know what the concept is? Do you want to explain it?
You make your partner's argument for them in the best way you possibly can.
Exactly. So the goal is to articulate your disagreement partner's arguments in like the best faith possible way. Like, you know, A+, it shows that you understand it, that you empathize with it, that you are able to potentially find, it's obviously not your position, but that you express understanding. Who wants to go first? This is going to be fun, okay? And we're going to grade. We'll grade it with the audience as well, all right? We'll somehow give a community grade. Do you need a second, or are you good?
Yeah, I think I need a second to organize all the thoughts.
All right,
Are you ready to be Niels?
I'm ready to be Niels.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you guys, you have the matching haircuts.
I'm really fixated on that.
I know, I
So-
love it. Well, it's like you planned it. Okay.
Everything I've said tonight, and everything I've said tonight, I could have been saying 5 years ago, I could have been saying 10 years ago, I could have been saying 20 years ago about artificial intelligence. A number of people in the field of cognitive science writ large have been saying for several decades now that we would not be able to achieve what we've been able to achieve. And they were quite vocal about it. And they tended to be people who were quite sympathetic to the notion that there is something unique and special about humans, and that we should value that and appreciate that. And despite that consensus within cognitive science, there were a few holdouts who said, you know what, if we just do statistical modeling and get a huge amount of data, and then it turns out with some chips that are incredibly powerful, like we will actually be able to emulate human thought. And it turns out they were way more right about that than a lot of people in my position now, and certainly a few years ago, and certainly 10 years ago would have ever said. So if that was true, and I would have been wrong 3 years ago, and I would have been wrong back then, maybe I'm wrong right now. And maybe the growth will still continue, and maybe we will come back, and Bill Gates, we might have gotten the dates wrong, but he will have been right, that we will have tutors and all of the things that are being promised right now.
The infinite love.
The infinite love.
Okay. All right. What kind of grade? That was pretty good. What do you give them? B+?
Can you add something about high education for high achieving versus struggling students?
Yes,
Yeah.
fair,
All
fair.
right.
So not only if we had all of that, we would then be able to give that to a few students who would then, like we could almost self-create the what is it, the Steve Jobs quotes, the dreamers, the misfits, the creatives, and they will totally revolutionize society. John Galt, Ayn Rand, the whole thing, writ large, society transformed as we know it.
That got worse. That's like a C. Yeah, that degraded. Okay.
I'll give you an A-. I think it was pretty close with a hint of sarcasm at the end.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
You ready?
Just a hint. Yeah, I think. Okay, I think the key patterns, we've seen this over and over before. Everyone always says, this time it's different. It's not different this time. Let's see. The AIs do not actually think. They're just statistical models, and you need a teacher who actually thinks in order to be able to diagnose students' challenges and support them properly. And even in a world where all of this did work and you could magically create software tutors, they would increase the divergence of student outcomes, which is an undesirable goal for society. We actually want to encourage our students to stay closer together and empathize with each other and learn about each other more.
Okay, what do you get?
That'd be. Missed the whole dissolution of American democracy point.
Yeah. Well, I give you both, for the disagreement and our third live one, I give you both A+. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. And we can